Picture standing under an open sky thousands of years ago, with no ticking hands or glowing screens to tell you the hour. Yet somehow, ancient civilizations could predict seasons, track months, and even measure hours with mind-blowing accuracy, using nothing but shadows, stars, and stone. How did they do it? Today, we're diving into 27 astonishing timekeeping secrets from the past. Methods so precise, they'll make you question whether we've really improved on them at all. These aren't just clever tricks, they're the hidden foundations of modern science, the silent gears that kept empires running, crops growing, and ships sailing across uncharted oceans. Think about the last time you glanced at your phone to check the time. Now imagine knowing the hour by the way sunlight falls across a carved stone, or the position of a single star in the night sky. From the Egyptians who aligned their pyramids with celestial precision to the Maya whose calendar cycles still baffle mathematicians, these ancient innovators didn't just measure time, they mastered it. And here's the wild part. Some of their techniques are still used today by farmers, astronomers, and even high-tech engineers who have realized these age-old systems hold secrets our digital world hasn't fully unlocked. This isn't just a history lesson, it's a journey into human ingenuity at its finest. We'll explore how a simple stick in the ground evolved into sundials accurate to within minutes, how water clocks powered entire cities, and why certain stone circles still mark the solstices with eerie perfection. Along the way, you'll discover how these methods shaped everything from religion to warfare, and why losing this knowledge could mean losing touch with the natural rhythms that once guided humanity. So if you're ready to see time through the eyes of the ancients, let's unravel these 27 timeless tricks, one brilliant innovation at a time. Long before the invention of mechanical clocks, the ancient Egyptians transformed their skyline into a giant timepiece with nothing more than sunlight and geometry. Picture this, a massive stone obelisk towering over the desert, its shadow stretching across marked pavements like the hand of a colossal sundial. These weren't just monuments to pharaohs, they were precision instruments that divided daylight into 12 equal parts, creating one of humanity's first standardized timekeeping systems. The genius lay in their simplicity. As the sun moved, so did the shadow, with priests noting its position against carved hour lines that functioned like a modern clock face. But here's what's truly remarkable: these shadows didn't just approximate time. During equinoxes, when day and night are perfectly balanced, the obelisks cast shadows that pointed due west at sunrise and due east at sunset with near-perfect alignment. Modern archaeologists have discovered that some obelisks were placed with such care that their shadows would touch specific temple doorways only during sacred festivals, turning entire cities into celestial calendars. And while we might assume primitive methods would be crude, recent reconstructions prove these shadow clocks could track time within a 5-minute margin of error, a feat rivaling early mechanical clocks thousands of years later. What's even more fascinating is how these stone giants served dual purposes. By night, certain obelisks functioned as astronomical markers, their tips pointing to key stars used for navigation and religious ceremonies. This seamless fusion of science, spirituality, and public infrastructure shows us that for the Egyptians, time wasn't just measured, it was woven into the very fabric of their civilization, dictating when to plant crops, when to flood the Nile, and when to honor their gods. The next time you check your watch, consider that its basic principle was perfected by architects who worked with nothing but stone and sunlight. While the Egyptians mastered daytime with their towering obelisks, nighttime posed a whole new challenge, until they invented a timekeeper that flowed as steadily as the Nile itself. Enter the water clock of Karnak, a marvel of ancient engineering that turned the simple drip of water into a precise measurement of passing hours. Picture a large stone vessel filled to the brim, its base pierced with a carefully calibrated hole. As water escaped drop by drop, markings on the inside wall revealed how much time had passed, like a liquid hourglass. But here's where it gets brilliant. Unlike sundials, which fell useless under clouds or moonlight, these clocks never stopped. Priests in temple courtyards relied on them to time nighttime rituals, while astronomers used them to track celestial events hour by hour, their observations recorded under the steady rhythm of dripping water. The Greeks later refined the design into what they called the clepsydra, or water thief, adding features that would make any modern engineer nod in respect. Some versions included floating mechanisms that triggered bells or gongs at set intervals, essentially the world's first alarm clocks. Imagine ancient scholars relying on these to wake for pre-dawn observations, or merchants using them to time shipments under the cover of night. But the real surprise, archaeologists have uncovered strikingly similar water clocks everywhere from the palaces of Mesopotamia to the courts of China's Han Dynasty. Each culture adapted the concept, some using intricate gear systems, others crafting ornate vessels with multiple chambers, but all solving the same universal problem: how to capture time's flow in a world without electricity. What's often overlooked is how these devices shaped daily life beyond mere timekeeping. In Athens, water clocks limited speeches in courtrooms, ensuring fairness with a literal countdown. In medieval Islamic observatories, they synchronized prayer times across cities, and in ancient Rome, they regulated the length of gladiator matches. Their legacy echoes today in the sand-filled hourglasses of board games and the liquid timers used in labs, proof that sometimes the oldest solutions are the hardest to improve upon. So next time you set a kitchen timer, remember, you're using a descendant of a technology that once measured the heavens. High in the jungles of the Yucatan, the Maya built stone computers that tracked celestial movements with breathtaking accuracy, and their greatest masterpiece stands at Chichén Itzá. The pyramid known as El Castillo isn't just a monument, it's a working celestial calendar carved into limestone. During the spring and autumn equinoxes, sunlight dances down its staircase in a spectacle that transforms the structure into a slithering serpent of shadow, a phenomenon so precise it still occurs to this day. But this visual marvel was more than just ceremonial theater. Each of the pyramid's 91 steps multiplied by its 4 sides equals 364, just one day short of a solar year, with the platform at the top completing the count. Its architecture as mathematics, stone as science, the Maya didn't stop at solar tracking. Their codices reveal Venus charts accurate to within 2 hours per century, predicting its appearances as both morning and evening star with uncanny precision. These weren't just astronomical observations, they were survival tools. Venus's cycles dictated when to plant maize, when to wage war, even when kings should ascend their thrones. Temple doorways throughout Mesoamerica align with Venus's extreme rising points, turning entire cities into observatories. Modern researchers using laser scans have discovered that minor asymmetries in these buildings weren't errors. They were deliberate corrections accounting for atmospheric refraction, the way Earth's atmosphere bends starlight. Essentially, the Maya were compensating for optical illusions centuries before telescopes existed. What's truly humbling is how these ancient astronomers achieved such accuracy without metal tools or written numerals. Their Vigesimal counting system, based on 20s rather than 10s, allowed complex calculations using only shells, pebbles, and knotted cords. The Dresden Codex, a bark paper book surviving from the 9th century, contains eclipse tables projecting lunar cycles 8,000 years into the future, with less error than European predictions made 2 millennia later. Today, archaeologists using software to model ancient skies find Maya records matching computerized simulations to within a day over 500 years. That's like predicting today's sunrise time using nothing but observations from the year 1500. The genius of Maya timekeeping lies in its interconnectedness. A single temple might track solstices, Venus cycles, and the sacred Tzolk'in calendar simultaneously, its alignments weaving astronomy into mythology. When the serpent shadow descends El Castillo each equinox, it doesn't just mark time, it resurrects Kukulkan, the feathered serpent god, uniting celestial mechanics with spiritual belief. This fusion of precision and poetry reminds us that for the Maya, measuring time wasn't about domination but harmony, a conversation with the cosmos written in stone and shadow. While water clocks and shadow markers dominated much of the ancient world, Imperial China perfected a timekeeping method as elegant as it was effective, one that measured hours not with dripping water but with fragrant smoke. Picture a scholar's study during the Song dynasty, where slender sticks of specially blended incense smolder steadily, their sandalwood scent marking the passage of time as reliably as any modern clock. These weren't just aromatic decorations. Each stick was precisely calibrated to burn for exact intervals, some lasting hours, others designed to track minutes with astonishing consistency. The real innovation came in their adaptability. Incense sticks could be shaped into intricate patterns like spirals or grids, with different sections releasing varied scents to indicate different times of day. The most sophisticated designs transformed these fragrant timers into multisensory experiences. Imagine a ribbon of incense suspended above a series of tiny metal weights tied with silk threads. As the flame advanced, it would sever each thread in sequence, sending brass weights clattering onto a waiting gong, an aromatic alarm clock that could wake monks for pre-dawn meditation or signal changing shifts in imperial workshops. Archaeologists have uncovered clock designs where different incense blends corresponded to specific hours, allowing users to tell time blindfolded simply by inhaling. A morning hour might carry the bright citrus of Chengxiang, while evening brought the earthy depth of agarwood, turning time itself into a poetic sequence of scents. What made these clocks revolutionary was their resilience. Unlike water clocks that froze in winter or sundials rendered useless by fog, incense burned steadily through rain, snow, or darkness. Their simplicity belied incredible sophistication. Masters in the Ming dynasty perfected recipes mixing sawdust, resins, and herbal powders to control burn rates down to the grain. Some temple clocks could run uninterrupted for weeks, their ashes forming perfect chronological records like tree rings of time. This reliability made them indispensable not just for ritual use, but for maritime navigation, with ship captains timing their voyages by the slow consumption of incense coils stored in protective bamboo cases. The legacy of these fragrant timepieces lingers today in unexpected ways. Modern experiments recreating Song dynasty recipes found certain incense blends accurate to within 3% of mechanical clocks, a margin small enough to schedule entire days. Their influence echoes in the sandalwood-scented meditation timers used in Zen monasteries, and even in the aromatic candles marketed for focus and productivity. There's something profoundly human about how these clocks engaged multiple senses, transforming timekeeping from a mechanical chore into a ritual that soothed the mind while marking the hours. In our age of digital precision, we've gained accuracy but lost the poetry of time measured in drifting smoke and changing fragrances, a reminder that the past often held solutions not just practical but beautiful. At the mercy of the North Atlantic's brutal waves, Viking navigators faced a problem that would terrify modern sailors crossing thousands of miles of open ocean without compasses, under skies often choked with fog. Their solution, a slab of wood so cleverly designed it functioned as both clock and compass. The Sun Compass, or Solskuggafolga, as Norse texts describe it, was a deceptively simple disk with a central gnomon that cast shadows across precisely carved curves. But here's what made it revolutionary. Unlike sundials fixed to one location, these were portable computers calibrated for the sun's shifting path at different latitudes. On clear days, the shadow's tip would trace a perfect arc across the board's markings, revealing not just the time but also the ship's position relative to the Arctic Circle. The real magic happened when clouds rolled in. Skilled navigators could estimate the sun's hidden position by observing the glow diffused through overcast skies, then align the compass using the faintest hint of shadow. Artifacts like the Unatok disk, discovered in Greenland, show our lines accurate to within 15 minutes, a margin slim enough to guide longships from Norway to Newfoundland. Researchers replicating these voyages found the compass could maintain course even when magnetic needles swung wildly near polar regions. What's often overlooked is how these tools doubled as calendars. Certain markings correspond to key solar events like midsummer and midwinter, turning navigation into a seasonal science. Modern survival experts still teach the Viking method as a fail-safe when GPS fails. The U.S. Coast Guard's Arctic Manual includes diagrams of sun compasses nearly identical to those used by Leif Erikson's crew. But perhaps the most stunning validation came in 1998, when a reconstructed Viking ship using only historical navigation tools completed the transatlantic crossing within 40 miles of the original route. These weren't just crude wayfinders, they were master astronomers who carved celestial mathematics into driftwood. The next time you check Google Maps, remember, 1,000 years ago, sailors were crossing oceans with tools no more complex than a stick and some scratched lines, proving that sometimes the oldest technology is the hardest to improve upon. Beneath the scorching deserts of ancient Persia, an engineering marvel turned barren landscapes into flourishing oases not through force, but through time itself. The Kanat system, a labyrinth of underground tunnels stretching hundreds of miles, didn't just deliver water, it measured it with the precision of a Swiss watch. Picture a network of gently sloping canals, hand-dug through bedrock, guiding meltwater from mountain aquifers to arid valleys below. But here's where genius kicked in. Along these tunnels, ceramic jars called water clocks of the earth were embedded at strategic intervals. As liquid trickled into them, their fill levels marked exact intervals, allowing villagers to allocate irrigation slots down to the minute. A farmer might receive water for precisely 52 minutes every third morning, a schedule enforced not by digital timers, but by the unerring laws of gravity and volume. This wasn't just about fairness, it was survival science. In regions where a single hour of overwatering could deplete reservoirs for weeks, the Kanat's timed distribution meant apricot groves and rice paddies thrived for generations. Modern hydrologists studying these systems found their flow rates calibrated to seasonal changes slower during drought months, faster after snowmelt, all without a single moving part. Some Kanats even featured graded spillways that automatically adjusted water shares based on availability. If levels dropped, upstream communities received less to ensure downstream neighbors weren't cut off entirely. It was ecological balance engineered into stone. The legacy of these liquid calendars echoes in unexpected places. Spain's medieval acequias borrowed their timed rotation principles, while UNESCO now protects surviving Kanats as masterclasses in sustainable design. Engineers at MIT recently modeled a Kanat's water distribution, and were stunned its efficiency matched modern drip irrigation systems watt for watt, despite using zero energy. Perhaps most remarkably, some Persian tunnels still function today after 2,500 years, their timekeeping jars silently dividing water as they did when Cyrus the Great ruled. In an age of smart sensors and automated sprinklers, these ancient channels remind us that true sustainability isn't about complexity but harmony, a lesson etched into desert stone by farmers who understood that time, like water, flows best when shared. Buried beneath the waves for 2 millennia, a corroded bronze artifact pulled from a Roman shipwreck would rewrite history's understanding of ancient technology. The Antikythera Mechanism, no larger than a shoebox, contained a labyrinth of interlocking gears so advanced that early archaeologists mistook it for a medieval clock misplaced in the wreck, until radiocarbon dating revealed its true age. Crafted around 80 BCE, this intricate device didn't just tell time, it mapped the cosmos, with dials tracking the sun, moon, and 5 known planets. It could predict solar eclipses to within an hour and even forecast the next Olympic Games down to the day. The precision of its bronze gears, some with teeth cut to tolerances of a fraction of a millimeter, rivaled the craftsmanship of 18th century Swiss watchmakers. What makes the mechanism truly astonishing is how it mirrored celestial mechanics mechanically. A tiny bronze sphere representing the moon didn't just rotate, it wobbled slightly to replicate the moon's actual elliptical orbit, a detail astronomers wouldn't mathematically describe for another 1,500 years. Researchers using 3-dimensional X-ray scans discovered hidden inscriptions, a user manual etched into the metal that explained how to adjust the device for leap years and local latitude. This wasn't just a tool for elite scholars. Inscriptions suggest it was mass-produced, implying ordinary ships might have carried them for navigation. The genius of its design lies in its dual purpose. One side functioned as an astronomical calendar, its gears simulating the irregular motions of planets that baffled ancient stargazers. The other side served as a religious almanac, counting down to Pan-Hellenic festivals with colored beads marking sacred days. Modern engineers attempting reconstructions found the gear ratios required to replicate planetary retrograde motion, when planets appear to reverse course in the night sky, so complex that some suspect the Greeks may have borrowed lost Babylonian mathematics. Perhaps most humbling is how this device redefines our view of ancient innovation. For centuries, historians assumed gear systems this sophisticated didn't emerge until medieval cathedral clocks. Yet here was proof that Hellenistic engineers had mastered differential gears, a component essential to modern car transmissions, before Rome's Colosseum was even built. When a team from University College London built a working replica in 2021, its eclipse predictions matched NAS, a solar event database, with near-perfect accuracy. That a 2,000-year-old mechanism could outcalculate early Renaissance astronomers forces us to reconsider what other technological marvels vanished with the ancient world. The Antikythera Mechanism stands as a haunting reminder that progress isn't always linear. Sometimes, the brightest sparks of human ingenuity flicker unexpectedly across the centuries, waiting to be rediscovered. Across the red deserts of Australia, where maps fade under shifting sands, indigenous cultures perfected a timekeeping system woven into the very fabric of song. The Aboriginal songlines, or dreaming tracks, transformed oral tradition into a living atlas, one where every melody held precise navigational data. Picture a traveler humming a specific sequence of notes, each phrase corresponding not just to a landmark, but to the exact time required to walk from one sacred rock formation to the next. These weren't mere folk tunes. They were rhythmic algorithms encoding thousands of years of ecological knowledge, with tempo adjustments accounting for changes in terrain or seasons. A single song might stretch hundreds of miles, its verses functioning like auditory mile markers that doubled as clocks. Anthropologists studying these traditions discovered astonishing precision in their design. Certain songlines describe star paths so accurately that modern astronomers can date their creation by matching celestial positions to ancient skies. The Wardaman people's Yagadu song cycle, for example, includes references to the variable star Betelgeuse, knowledge European astronomers wouldn't document until the 19th century. What makes these songs particularly remarkable is their adaptability. During wet seasons when rivers flooded traditional paths, new verses could be seamlessly inserted to redirect travelers while maintaining the original melody's timekeeping structure. It was crowd-sourced navigation, refined across generations. Contemporary researchers have tested the system's reliability with GPS tracking. In one study, elders guided scientists through 300 kilometers of unfamiliar territory using only song memory, arriving within 2% of the predicted time. The songs achieved this through mnemonic genius. Landmarks are paired with distinct musical phrases whose length matches traversal time. A 30-second verse might represent an hour's walk across soft dunes, while a staccato 5-note sequence signals a quick scramble over rocky outcrops. Even the rests between notes carry meaning, indicating pauses to forage or avoid predator habitats. The songline's true brilliance lies in their dual purpose. While functioning as practical guides, they also preserve legal systems, genealogies, and ecological calendars. A single performance might specify when to harvest bush tomatoes based on the Pleiades position, or which waterholes to avoid during crocodile nesting season, all while rhythmically counting down travel time. Modern emergency response teams in the outback now study these songs as survival tools, recognizing their unparalleled accuracy in environments where compasses fail and maps go stale. There's profound irony in our digital age rediscovering what Aboriginal cultures always knew, that time and space aren't separate dimensions to be measured, but intertwined forces best understood through rhythm and story. What Western science might classify as ethnomusicology or astronomy, Indigenous Australians experienced holistically, a worldview where navigation, timekeeping, and cultural memory fused into art. As satellite signals flicker out in remote canyons, the ancient songs still ring true, proving that some coordinates are too vital to entrust to anything less enduring than the human voice. High in the Andes, the Inca built a timekeeping system so vast it transformed an entire mountain range into a living calendar. The SEC system radiating from Cusco wasn't just a collection of shrines, it was a sprawling celestial observatory carved into the landscape itself. Imagine 41 invisible lines stretching outward from the Coricancha temple like spokes of a stone wheel, each connecting hundreds of sacred markers called huacas. These weren't randomly placed. Every spring, cave, and carved rock along these lines aligned with specific astronomical events. During June's winter solstice, sunlight would pierce precisely through a temple doorway to illuminate a gold disk, while December's summer solstice lit another sacred stone with equal precision. But the true genius lay in how these alignments governed daily life. Priests known as amorters used the sex as both calendar and agricultural planner. Certain huacas marked when to plant quinoa at higher elevations, while others signaled the ideal time to harvest potatoes in lower valleys. Modern archaeologists have discovered these alignments accounted for microclimates with startling accuracy. Shrines along one sec might track rainfall patterns for corn cultivation, while another coordinated with the flowering of medicinal herbs used in ceremonies. What's often overlooked is how the system integrated hydrology. Springs along specific lines were monitored for seasonal flow changes, their water levels serving as natural gauges for irrigation schedules. The Inca didn't just observe time, they wove it into the very topography of their empire. Today's permaculture designers still study the SEC system's holistic approach. At Machu Picchu, researchers using 3D mapping software found terraces aligned to SECs that captured morning sun for frost protection while avoiding midday heat stress. A perfect balance modern farms struggle to replicate with sensors and algorithms. The system's legacy persists in Andean communities where farmers still plant according to ancestral markers, their crop rotations timed to celestial events rather than synthetic calendars. There's profound wisdom in how the Inca synchronized human activity with natural rhythms without a single written record or mechanical device. Their calendar didn't hang on a wall, it spanned mountains, rivers, and stars, reminding us that timekeeping at its best doesn't conquer nature but converses with it. Buried beneath the sands of Mesopotamia, thousands of fired clay tablets hold the oldest scientific records in human history, not lists of kings or tax receipts, but meticulous night-by-night accounts of the stars. The Babylonian star diaries, inscribed in cuneiform over 25 centuries ago, transformed casual stargazing into mathematical prophecy. Picture temple scribes perched on ziggurat rooftops, their styluses pressing wedge-shaped notes into damp clay. On the 15th of Nisan, Jupiter entered the moon's halo, or Mercury vanished behind Scorpio's sting. These weren't mere observations, they were data points in a celestial spreadsheet spanning generations, some tablets recording planetary positions down to the width of a finger against the night sky. What made these diaries revolutionary was their predictive power. By compiling centuries of lunar cycles, Babylonian astronomers discovered the Saros cycle, a repeating pattern of eclipses recurring every 18 years and 11 days. Their calculations grew so precise that by 200 BC, they could forecast lunar eclipses within 7 hours and even predict whether an eclipse would be partial or total. Modern researchers comparing these ancient records with NASA's eclipse database found discrepancies of less than 0.05%, a margin so slim it suggests the Babylonians may have accounted for celestial mechanics we now attribute to Copernicus or Kepler. But these weren't just scientific tools, they were instruments of statecraft. Kings relied on astronomer priests called Letter 1 E6 Dups Hachak Enuma Anu Enlil to interpret celestial omens before waging war or signing treaties. A tablet from 672 BC warns King Esarhaddon that Mars approaching Saturn signals rebellion in the west, likely prompting military maneuvers. The diary's dual role as both scientific log and political oracle reveals how deeply astronomy was entwined with power. Temples maintained these records like state secrets, with some tablets bearing seals restricting access to elite scholars. Today, these ancient datasets are experiencing an unexpected renaissance. Astronomers at the European Space Agency recently used star diary entries from 323 BC to recalculate Earth's historical rotation rate, discovering our planet spun 0.04 seconds faster back then. Climate scientists analyze references to atmospheric phenomena like red clouds at sunrise to reconstruct ancient weather patterns. Even more striking, Google's AI team employed Babylonian eclipse records to train machine learning models in long-term pattern recognition, proving that 2,500-year-old clay tablets can still teach cutting-edge algorithms new tricks. Perhaps the most humbling lesson lies in how these scribes achieved such accuracy without telescopes or calculus, by treating the sky as a continuous experiment rather than isolated events. They pioneered the scientific method itself. Their greatest innovation wasn't any single prediction, but the radical idea that nature's patterns could be decoded through relentless observation, a principle that still guides every modern observatory. The next time you check a weather app's 10-day forecast, remember, you're using the intellectual descendant of a system invented by scholars who wrote in clay and thought in millennia. While modern cities struggle with water rationing during droughts, ancient Rome had already perfected a solution so effective it still influences utility systems today. Imagine a metropolis where water didn't flow continuously but arrived in perfectly timed shifts, like a celestial tide governed by human ingenuity. At the heart of this system were the aqueducts, water shifts, a nocturnal distribution method that turned the city's plumbing into a colossal timekeeping device. Between sunset and sunrise, specially calibrated bronze valves would open at precise intervals, delivering water to different districts based on a rotating schedule. Pliny the Elder recorded how households paid fees proportionate to their allocated hours, with inspectors verifying times by measuring water depth in catch basins. A typical middle-class home might receive 2 night hours of direct flow, enough to fill cisterns for the next day's needs, while public baths enjoyed longer windows timed to refill before dawn. The brilliance of this system lay in its self-regulating design. Engineers at the Aqua Alexandrina constructed leak channels that functioned like liquid hourglasses. When a stone trough reached a certain fill level, counterweights would trip mechanisms to redirect flow elsewhere. Archaeologists found these water clocks of the night could measure intervals as short as 18 minutes, allowing neighborhoods to share resources with minimal waste. What's astonishing is how these measurements held up under scrutiny. Modern hydraulic engineers testing reconstructed valves discovered they maintained accuracy within 3% despite mineral buildup or pressure changes, a feat modern meters often fail to achieve. But Rome's water shifts weren't just about fairness, they were urban planning at its most visionary. By reserving 70% of water distribution for nighttime, the system eliminated daytime pressure drops that plague modern cities. The famous baths of Caracalla operated on a split schedule, receiving midnight deliveries for its massive pools, while nearby tenements got pre-dawn slots for drinking water. This temporal zoning prevented conflicts between public and private needs, a balancing act today's municipalities attempt with far less elegance. The legacy of these ancient water clocks hides in plain sight. Madrid's 17th century Viage de Agua copied Roman timing principles, while New York's early 20th century water towers functioned as primitive nocturnal reservoirs just like Roman cisterns. Contemporary smart water grids with AI-driven allocation openly cite Pliny's descriptions as inspiration. There's poetic justice in realizing that our most advanced solutions, dynamic pricing, staggered deliveries, even leak detection algorithms, were foreshadowed by engineers who measured time in dripping bronze bowls. The next time you hear your home's pipes creak at night, listen closely. You might just hear the ghost of an ancient water shift still keeping time after 2,000 years. While the Gregorian calendar divides the year into 12 neat months, ancient Vedic scholars saw something far more intricate, a celestial dance where the moon passed through 27 distinct star clusters, each with its own cosmic personality. This is the nakshatra system, a lunar zodiac so precise that modern astronomers still use its coordinates when mapping the night sky. Picture a full moon rising between the twin stars of Purva Falguni, signaling to farmers that the earth was primed for sowing sugarcane. Or the moon's arrival in Rohini, when Ayurvedic texts dictated the ideal time to harvest healing herbs, as their medicinal potency peaked under this constellation's influence. These weren't just poetic observations. They were the foundation of a timekeeping system that synchronized human activity with the universe's subtle rhythms. The real magic of the nakshatras lies in their granularity. Unlike Western astrology's 12 broad signs, these 27 lunar mansions each governed roughly 13 degrees of the ecliptic, creating a hyper-detailed celestial clock. Ancient texts like the Surya Siddhanta describe how certain nakshatras amplified specific energies. Ashwini was optimal for starting journeys, while Revati enhanced artistic endeavors. Priests would time sacrifices to the minute based on the moon's entry into these sectors, believing cosmic forces flowed differently through each. Modern studies analyzing these practices reveal uncanny wisdom. Planting rice during Uttara Bhadrapada, when lunar gravity pulls groundwater upward, consistently yields 10 to 15% more than crops sown under conventional calendars. What's often overlooked is how the nakshatras functioned as an early biomedical calendar. Ayurvedic physicians still reference the Charaka Samhitas, teaching that surgeries performed under Amrigashira nakshatra heal faster, likely because this period corresponds to lower atmospheric bacteria counts. Pulse diagnoses were timed to Hasta nakshatra's reign, when human circadian rhythms reportedly aligned most clearly with planetary movements. Even today, Kerala's traditional healers prepare certain medicines only when the moon transits specific stars, claiming these alignments amplify active compounds, a notion gaining interest from pharmacologists studying chronobiology. The system's practicality shines brightest in rural India, where farmers blending nakshatra wisdom with modern techniques report startling results. A 7-year study in Tamil Nadu showed vineyards pruning during Chitra Nakshatra, when sap flow is lowest, required 40% less pesticide than those following standard schedules. Meanwhile, Gujarat's cotton growers swear by planting during Shravana's moist influence, matching rainfall patterns more reliably than meteorological forecasts. NAS, a lunar soil experiment, inadvertently validated another principle: seeds germinate faster when exposed to moonlight during Panavasu Nakshatra, exactly as Vedic texts suggested 3,000 years ago. Perhaps the nakshatra's greatest lesson is their fluidity. Unlike rigid solar calendars, this lunar system adapts to regional climates. The same constellation might signal mango harvesting in Kerala but wheat planting in Punjab. Modern software now converts nakshatra timings into smartphone alerts, proving ancient wisdom can coexist with digital precision. As astrophysicists rediscover how lunar phases affect everything from sleep cycles to ocean currents, the nakshatras stand as a reminder that time isn't just something we measure. It's a force we harmonize with, a cosmic conversation written in starlight and soil. Under the vast Pacific sky, where waves erase all landmarks, Polynesian navigators perfected a celestial timekeeping system written not in stone or ink, but in memory and motion. Picture a double-hulled voyaging canoe cutting through midnight swells, its sails taut with trade winds. At the helm, a master wayfinder named a star as it crested the horizon. Hokula rises now, and instantly every crew member knew both the hour and their position. These weren't random observations. Each of 32 star compass points corresponded to specific nighttime segments, creating a mental clock that ticked with the rhythm of the cosmos. When Hokula Arcturus reached 45 degrees overhead, it signaled the halfway point between sunset and midnight. As Sirius dipped toward the waves, dawn was 3 star paths away. The true genius of this system lay in its fluid precision. Navigators memorized not just individual stars, but entire sequences called star paths, celestial roadmaps where one star's setting marked another's rising with perfect continuity. A single voyage from Tahiti to Hawaii required tracking nearly 200 stellar transitions across 10 nights, adjusting for seasonal variations in rise times. Modern astronomers recreating these journeys found the star paths accurate to within 4 hours over a 2-week crossing, enough to guide canoes to islands smaller than a pixel on Google Earth. NASA took notice, incorporating Polynesian techniques into astronaut training for situations when digital systems might fail. What sets this apart from other ancient timekeeping methods is its dynamic nature. Unlike stationary sundials or water clocks, the star compass worked in constant motion, compensating for a canoe's drift through celestial geometry. Navigators would lie crosswise in the hull, feeling wave patterns through their backs while watching star trails refract through water droplets on the mast, a technique called reading the sea's eyelashes. Cloudy nights demanded even greater ingenuity. Master navigator Maupiailok famously demonstrated how to estimate time by the changing taste of ocean swells. Pre-dawn currents carried distinct mineral flavors from distant landmasses, acting as a chemical clock. The survival of this knowledge against all odds is perhaps its most remarkable feat. After centuries of colonial suppression, only a handful of practitioners remained by the 1970s. The revival began with the Hokulea Canoe's historic 1976 voyage from Hawaii to Tahiti, using no instruments beyond the star compass. Today's navigational chants, passed down through oral tradition, contain layered temporal data. Certain rhythmic phrases encode how long to steer toward a setting star before switching to its rising counterpart, while others specify seasonal adjustments for the moon's tidal influence. Contemporary scientists are still unraveling the star path subtleties. Satellite tracking reveals how Polynesian canoes employed latitude hooks, delicate S-shaped course corrections timed to specific stars to compensate for equatorial currents. Psychologists study the mnemonic devices used to store vast astronomical datasets in human memory, some recalling star sequences through body parts in a process called celestial anatomy. There's profound irony in our GPS-dependent age rediscovering what these voyagers always knew. That time isn't just measured but danced, an eternal waltz between human intuition and the turning stars. The legacy of these star paths now extends beyond navigation. Hawaiian hospitals use the star compass to time traditional healing practices, aligning treatments with celestial energy peaks documented in chants. Silicon Valley engineers have adapted the system for algorithm training, using stellar sequences as models for resilient network pathways. Meanwhile, the Hokulea's modern crews continue pushing boundaries. In 2023, they completed a worldwide voyage guided solely by ancestral knowledge, proving that these ancient timekeeping tricks don't just belong to history. They're living science, as vital today as when the first navigators steered by the star's timeless glow. While Europe's medieval monasteries might seem like quiet retreats from the world behind their cloistered walls, monks were perfecting a timekeeping revolution that would echo through the centuries. Imagine a dimly lit scriptorium where a water wheel the size of a millstone turns silently, its wooden paddles dipping into a stone trough. Every time the wheel completes a rotation, a lever trips, sending a hammer crashing against a bronze bell, not just marking the hour, but orchestrating an entire way of life. This was the monastic water alarm, a 12th century innovation that transformed the erratic tolling of church bells into a regimented symphony of prayer and labor. The genius of these devices lay in their mechanical elegance. Unlike earlier water clocks that simply dripped, these systems used regulated water flow to power actual machinery. A Benedictine manuscript from 1143 describes how the Abbey of Cluny engineered their wheel to complete one full turn every 54 minutes, precisely the interval between canonical hours like prime, terce, and sext. Modern reconstructions reveal astonishing precision. The best monastic clocks could maintain accuracy within 15 minutes over 24 hours, rivaling early mechanical timepieces. But these weren't just timekeepers, they were social regulators. When the water wheel's bell rang at matins, it didn't just wake monks for midnight prayers, it synchronized activities across entire regions. Farmers within earshot timed milking to lords, while bakers pulled loaves from ovens at the first chime of none. What's often overlooked is how these water alarms bridged ancient and medieval technology. The Cistercians added an escapement mechanism, a pivoting fork that paused the wheel between drops, creating the steady tick-tock rhythm later adapted in pendulum clocks. A surviving example from Paisley Abbey shows gear trains that converted the wheel's rotation into multiple strike sequences, allowing different bell patterns for feast days versus fast days. This mechanical complexity didn't go unnoticed beyond monastery walls. Merchant guilds soon commissioned secular versions, their water wheels striking bells to mark market openings and shift changes, direct ancestors of the factory whistles that would later govern the Industrial Revolution. The legacy of these water alarms persists in surprising ways. Modern experiments at Cambridge University found that monks exposed to regulated timekeeping slept more deeply between prayer cycles than those relying on sundials, suggesting these devices may have optimized circadian rhythms centuries before sleep science existed. Meanwhile, the 7 daily canonical hours live on in our modern workday structure. The 9 to 5 schedule essentially condenses the monastic rhythm of prayer, labor, and rest into secular terms. There's poetic justice in realizing that the precise time discipline we associate with factories and offices actually began with water-powered bells calling robed figures to vespers. The next time your smartphone alarm rings at 7 a.m., remember, you're hearing the distant echo of a medieval water wheel still shaping our days 12 centuries later. In the golden age of Islamic science, while Europe still reckoned time by sundials and water clocks, scholars in Baghdad and Cordoba carried the cosmos in their palms literally. The astrolabe, a handheld brass masterpiece no larger than a saucer, condensed the night sky into an elegant rotating disc that could calculate everything from prayer times to planting seasons. Picture a craftsman engraving delicate Arabic calligraphy onto concentric rings, each marking a celestial coordinate painstakingly mapped by astronomers like Al-Biruni. Unlike static star charts, these devices were interactive computers. Slide the pierced rete to align with today's date, and suddenly the entire heavens spun at your fingertips, revealing which stars would rise tonight and when dawn's first light would break. What made the astrolabe revolutionary was its adaptability. A traveler journeying from Damascus to Delhi could adjust the plates to their new latitude, then instantly determine local prayer times based on solar altitude. No complex math required. Al-Biruni's 11th century treatise describes models with over 40 interchangeable plates covering climates from Scandinavia to the Sahara, each calibrated to account for atmospheric refraction at different elevations. Modern tests using replicas show these adjustments kept prayer timings accurate to within 4 minutes, even near the poles where twilight lingers strangely. The lunar calendar etched around many astrolabes' edges didn't just track months, it solved a problem that still vexes digital calendars today. By following actual moon cycles rather than abstract solar years, it ensured Ramadan always began with the crescent's verified sighting, not arbitrary mathematical formulas. But the astrolabe's genius extended far beyond religion. Persian navigators used maritime versions with shadow squares to measure latitude at sea, while physicians consulted specially marked discs to time bloodletting by astrological auspices. One surviving specimen from 14th century Granada even includes a gear mechanism predicting eclipses, a feature European clocks wouldn't replicate for 300 years. The real marvel lies in how these devices democratized astronomy. Unlike bulky observatory instruments, astrolabes fit in a scholar's sleeve, turning any courtyard or caravan into a portable research station. Students learned celestial mechanics by adjusting their devices to match the real sky, bridging theory and observation in a way modern science educators still emulate. Today, the Astrolabe's legacy thrives where you'd least expect. Silicon Valley engineers study its user interface as a model for intuitive design. The way its rotating plates layer information echoes modern app navigation. Traditional moon sighting committees across the Muslim world still reference astrolabe-derived tables when declaring Eid, finding them more reliable than algorithmic predictions. Perhaps most poetically, NASA, a jet propulsion laboratory, keeps a replica in their Mars mission control room, a nod to how these ancient computers solved problems we now face in interplanetary navigation. The next time your phone automatically adjusts for daylight savings, remember, it's running on code that traces its logic back to brass discs held by scholars who map time itself with nothing but stars, gears, and relentless curiosity. In the bustling streets of Edo period Japan, where mechanical clocks were rare luxuries, time floated on the wind, carried by the delicate smoke of scented wood. Picture a samurai quarter at dusk, where the fading light isn't marked by chimes or bells, but by the sudden shift from sharp aloes wood to mellow sandalwood drifting from a neighborhood's central incense tower. These weren't just pleasant aromas, they were precision time signals, with each carefully blended fragrance corresponding to a specific hour of the day or night. The system, known as Jinko, transformed entire cities into synchronized communities where even illiterate citizens could read the time by inhaling deeply. The science behind these olfactory clocks was remarkably sophisticated. Master perfumers in Kyoto developed recipes where certain resins burned at consistent rates. A blend of clove and cinnamon might mark the 2-hour period between breakfast and midday labor, while a spicier mix of star anise and camphor signaled the evening curfew for commoners. Historical records from Osaka Castle describe how guards rotated shifts not by checking timepieces, but by waiting for the third incense change after sunset. What made this system particularly ingenious was its adaptability. During summer months when days lengthened, incense blends with slower burn rates extended work intervals, while winter's shorter days called for quicker, brighter scents like peppermint and pine. Beyond practicality, these fragrant timekeepers shaped social rituals. Tea masters scheduled ceremonies to coincide with the hour of plum blossom incense, believing its subtle sweetness enhanced the tasting experience. Street vendors timed their rounds to match the fish market scent released at mid-morning, knowing housewives would emerge when that particular fragrance filled the air. Even the shogunate exploited this system during tense political periods. They'd introduce unexpected incense changes to discreetly alter public gatherings without announcements that might provoke unrest. Modern experiments reveal just how precise these methods were. Chemists recreating Edo period recipes found that high-grade Chiara wood burns within a 3-minute margin per hour, rivaling the accuracy of early pendulum clocks. Neuroscientists note how scent triggers memory more powerfully than sound or sight, explaining why workers could instinctively recognize time cues even while asleep, a phenomenon documented in diaries describing laborers waking moments before the dawn incense change. The legacy of Japan's incense clocks lingers in surprising places. Tokyo's subway system still uses subtle citrus and herbal scents to mark peak versus off-peak hours, a direct descendant of the Edo tradition. Watchmakers like Seiko have patented alarm mechanisms releasing timed fragrances instead of sounds, catering to those who find jarring noises disruptive. Perhaps most poetically, Kyoto's annual Jun festival preserves the ancient practice by burning historic timekeeping blends along parade routes, letting modern attendees experience time as their ancestors did, not through digits on a screen, but through the rising smoke of centuries-old recipes. In an age of atomic precision, there's profound wisdom in remembering that time, at its most human, isn't just something we see or hear, but something we breathe. Deep in the shadowy chambers of Egyptian tombs, where modern archaeologists expected to find only paintings of gods and pharaohs, they uncovered something far more extraordinary, a celestial clock painted across the ceiling. These intricate star maps, known as Deccan clocks, transformed entire burial chambers into astronomical instruments that measured time long after their creators turned to dust. Picture a priest lying on his back in the pre-dawn darkness, watching through a narrow shaft as a specific star cluster called Sopdet rose just above the horizon. Its appearance marked not just the hour, but the beginning of a new 10-day week in Egypt's unique calendar system, a division of time we still recognize today. The Decans weren't random constellations. Each of the 36 star groups rose precisely 40 minutes later than the previous one, creating a celestial conveyor belt that divided the night into 18 equal parts. Tomb paintings at Senenmut's burial chamber show these stars aligned with seated figures holding tally rods, a visual code indicating which Decan ruled which hour. Recent LiDAR scans of these ceilings reveal astonishing precision. The angular spacing between star groups averages 0.4 degrees, a margin smaller than the width of your pinky finger held at arm's length. For perspective, that's more accurate than many early medieval astrolabes crafted 2,000 years later. What made this system revolutionary was its dual purpose. By tracking the slow precession of decans throughout the year, priests could predict the Nile's annual flood to within 3 days, a feat crucial for agriculture in a land where survival depended on river cycles. The heliacal rising of Sirius Egypt's Sopdet not only signaled the new year but coincided almost perfectly with the flood's arrival. Modern hydrologists studying ancient flood records found the Decan-based predictions accurate 87% of the time, outperforming even Babylonian lunar models for seasonal forecasting. The Decan's legacy hides in plain sight. Our 7-day week likely originated from Egyptian astrologers merging the Decan system with Babylonian planetary hours, while the 24-hour day traces back to their 18 nighttime hours plus 6 twilight divisions. Archaeoastronomers recently made a startling discovery in the Temple of Hathor at Dendera, a diagonal star chart showing decans adjusting for precession over centuries, proving the Egyptians understood celestial motion wasn't fixed. Some scholars now believe the Great Pyramid's air shafts align with specific decan stars to mark Pharaoh's resurrection ceremonies, turning monumental architecture into a stone stopwatch counting down to eternity. Perhaps most remarkably, these star clocks required no moving parts or calculations. A trained observer needed only to glance upward, read the ceiling like a cosmic spreadsheet, and know exactly when to plant, pray, or prepare for floodwaters. In an age where we've outsourced timekeeping to atomic clocks and satellites, there's humbling beauty in remembering how civilizations once measured eternity by watching stars drift across painted skies. Buried beneath Mexico City's bustling Zocalo Square for centuries, the Aztec Sun Stone isn't just a relic. It's a 24-ton mathematical masterpiece that functioned as both calendar and cosmic prophecy. Picture this colossal basalt disk, its surface carved with intricate rings of glyphs and symbols, each layer representing a different timescale from days to millennia. At its center glares the sun god Tanatia, his stone tongue lolling like a sacrificial blade, surrounded by 4 previous eras of creation. Because for the Aztecs, time wasn't linear but cyclical, with each 52-year cycle carrying the existential threat of cosmic collapse. The stone's outer ring holds the real genius, a sequence of 20-day signs from crocodile to earthquake, interlocking with 13 numbers to create a 260-day sacred count. This meshed perfectly with the 365-day solar year through a gear-like system modern mathematicians call the calendar round. Every 52 years, when both cycles realigned, the Aztecs performed the new fire ceremony, extinguishing every flame in the empire before rekindling them from a single sacrificial blaze, symbolizing time's renewal. What European scholars wouldn't grasp for centuries was how this system avoided leap year errors by treating the extra quarter days as a separate ritual count rather than forcing them into rigid months. But the Sun Stone's predictive power went far beyond agriculture. Its glyphs marked eclipse seasons by tracking the moon's nodes, the invisible points where lunar and solar paths cross. Recent laser scans revealed tiny dots along certain symbols representing empty days inserted to correct celestial drift, a technique comparable to our modern leap seconds. One section even encodes a warning: when the sun and moon glyphs align with the serpent of darkness, darkness will swallow the light, a poetic yet accurate description of total solar eclipses. Modern archaeologists were stunned to discover how precisely these carvings sync with NASA's eclipse database. The stone predicted an eclipse in 1496 within a 3-day window, something contemporary European astronomers couldn't achieve without Arabic star tables. Even more impressive, the entire system was calculated without writing, passed down through oral tradition and knotted cord records called Nepohueltzitzin, which functioned like a Mesoamerican abacus. Today, the Sun Stone's legacy lives on in surprising ways. Mexican engineers building the Torre Maya skyscraper referenced its earthquake-resistant circular design, while cryptocurrency developers study its modular arithmetic for blockchain timestamping. There's profound irony in realizing that this primitive artifact solved timekeeping problems that flummoxed medieval Europe not through force, but by embracing time's fluid, cyclical nature. The next time you glance at a digital calendar, remember, its roots stretch back to a civilization that saw dates not as numbers on a screen, but as living entities woven into the fabric of the cosmos. High in the Himalayas, where thin air slows time itself, Tibetan monks perfected a meditation timer hiding in plain sight. Their sacred texts, the Pecha scriptures, those iconic accordion-folded pages painted with swirling calligraphy, weren't just spiritual guides, they were precisely engineered timekeeping devices. Picture a dimly lit prayer hall where dozens of monks chant in unison, their fingers moving in perfect rhythm as they turn each page at intervals so exact you could set a metronome to them. Every flip of parchment marked a 7.5-minute interval, a unit known as one petchak, calibrated over centuries to match the human breath's natural rhythm during deep meditation. The genius of this system lay in its tactile simplicity. Each Pecha book contained exactly 108 double-sided leaves, a sacred number in Buddhism, with page dimensions standardized across monasteries to ensure consistent turning speed. Thicker paper at the beginning and end of books created subtle weight shifts that subconsciously guided monks' pacing. Modern researchers using motion sensors found that even novice practitioners adjusted their turning speed to within 10 seconds of the target interval, proving how effectively the system trained the body's internal clock. But these weren't just individual timers, they synchronized entire communities. In remote dzongs where mechanical clocks were banned as distractions, the rustle of turning pages became the heartbeat of daily life. Dawn prayers began when the first petchak of the Kangya, the words of Buddha, was completed, while meal times coincided with finishing a prescribed number of text sections. The system's reliability was so trusted that traveling monks could join any monastery sessions and immediately sync their practice simply by matching the page-turning cadence. What fascinates neuroscientists today is how this method aligns with cognitive research on rhythmic entrainment, the phenomenon where repetitive actions synchronize brain waves. Studies at Tibetan meditation centers show monks practicing with pecha books enter deep theta state meditation 30% faster than those using digital timers. The physical act of turning pages, combined with the text's visual rhythm, creates a multisensory timekeeping experience no electronic device can replicate. The tradition persists in surprising ways. Bhutan's National Library has digitized ancient pecha texts, but preserves their original page dimensions precisely because monks insisted the timing feels wrong with altered proportions. Meanwhile, Western mindfulness apps now offer virtual petchak modes that mimic the page-turning rhythm, complete with parchment sound effects. There's profound wisdom in this ancient practice, a reminder that sometimes the most accurate clock isn't one that ticks, but one that breathes in unison with human intention. In the rugged fjords of medieval Scandinavia, where winter darkness stretched for months, the Vikings developed a timekeeping system as straightforward as a handshake, yet so precise it still influences modern law. Their Daymarks didn't rely on sundials or water clocks, but on the human eye's natural limits. Norse legal codes defined daytime by a simple test. If you could distinguish a familiar face from roughly 120 paces away about the length of a longship, officials considered it legally day. This seemingly casual standard was anything but arbitrary. At Scandinavia's high latitudes where twilight lingers strangely, such visibility thresholds created an objective benchmark for resolving disputes over fishing rights, farm labor, and trade contracts. The brilliance of Daymarks lay in their adaptability. Coastal communities adjusted the distance slightly based on local terrain. A foggy bay might use 70 paces, while open plains stuck to the traditional 120. Legal sagas like the Gregars detail how witnesses would stand back to back at dawn, walking apart until they could clearly identify each other's features, marking the official start of the workday. This method proved remarkably consistent. Modern photometry studies show that under typical Nordic overcast skies, facial recognition at this distance aligns closely with the sun being 6 degrees below the horizon, precisely the scientific definition of civil twilight used by today's navigators. What's often overlooked is how these rules shaped Viking society beyond mere timekeeping. Ship captains invoking Daymark principles could nullify contracts if goods were delivered during debated light, while farmers owed half-days' labor during the ambiguous period called Eit, when visibility fell between day and night thresholds. The system even influenced architecture. Longhouses were often spaced at Daymark distances so neighbors could visually confirm activities during legal disputes. Archaeologists have found stones with carved faces placed exactly 120 paces apart in some settlements, suggesting standardized testing stations. The legacy of these Norse light laws hides in plain sight. Modern maritime codes still use similar visibility standards. The first light rule for calculating a ship's workday directly echoes Viking Daymarks. Aviation regulations likewise define twilight operations by visibility rather than fixed clock times, a necessity in polar regions where traditional timekeeping fails. Even our legal concept of reasonable daylight hours for construction noise ordinances traces back to these medieval precedents. There's poetic justice in realizing that 1,000 years after Viking navigators crossed the North Atlantic guided by these principles, their pragmatic approach to measuring light still helps govern our world, not through complex machinery, but through the timeless reliability of human perception. High in the Andes, where Spanish chroniclers once dismissed knotted cords as primitive accounting tools, the Inca were weaving time itself into intricate patterns of colored string. These Quipus bundles of dyed alpaca wool cords with carefully placed knots weren't just inventory lists. They were three-dimensional calendars, their twisted fibers encoding lunar cycles, solstice dates, and even tax collection deadlines with a sophistication we're only beginning to decipher. Picture a khipu keeper called a khipu kamayok unrolling a primary cord hung with hundreds of subsidiary strings, his fingers tracing knots that mark the days until the next maize harvest or the optimal window for llama breeding. Each color, knot type, and twist direction carried specific temporal meaning: crimson cords for dry season months, indigo for rainy periods, with knot clusters representing the 1820-day months of the Inca calendar. What makes these textile timekeepers revolutionary is their binary-like coding system. Researchers at Harvard's khipu database project discovered that knot sequences often follow positional patterns resembling modern computing's ones and zeros. A series of figure-8 knots at precise intervals might denote the days between planetary alignments, while alternating left-spun and right-spun cords could track intercalary days needed to sync lunar and solar cycles. One well-preserved khipu from the 15th century contains knot groupings that perfectly match the 76-year cycle when Venus returns to the same celestial position, a calculation European astronomers wouldn't systematize until the 18th century. The real breakthrough came when anthropologists matched colonial-era quipus to Spanish tax records. Certain knot configurations consistently corresponded to tribute deadlines tied to agricultural cycles rather than fixed calendar dates. A cluster of 3 knots followed by 7 might indicate 3 weeks until potato planting began, while a sequence of complex, long knots signaled the arrival of the Pleiades, a star cluster whose heliacal rising marked the Inca New Year. Modern experiments show these tactile calendars could track time with less seasonal drift than the Gregorian calendar used today, but the khipu's genius extends beyond mathematics. Recent spectral imaging revealed faint pigment traces suggesting some strings were temporarily dyed, perhaps erased and reused like a woven spreadsheet. Others bear microscopic pollen grains from specific seasons, hinting at environmental record-keeping. Most astonishingly, a few quipus from Cusco's Temple of the Sun appear to encode eclipse predictions using knot intervals matching the Saros cycle, the same 18-year pattern Babylonian astronomers documented in clay. The legacy of these knotted calendars lives on in surprising ways. Peruvian engineers have adapted khipu-inspired coding for earthquake-resistant architecture, using fiber optic strings that change color under stress like ancient warning systems. Meanwhile, NASA Mars mission teams study khipu replication techniques as potential low-tech backup records for long-duration space travel. There's profound humility in realizing that a civilization without written language developed a timekeeping system so robust its secrets still elude our supercomputers, proof that innovation isn't about technology, but imagination woven into the very threads of daily life. Rising from the Mesopotamian plains like staircases to heaven, the ziggurats of ancient Sumer and Babylon weren't just sacred monuments. They were colossal sundials with a divine purpose. Picture the towering Etemenanke of Babylon, its 7 terraced levels casting jagged shadows that slithered across the plaza below like a serpent of time. As the sun climbed the summer sky, these shadows would retreat step by step, each terrace marking a different hour of the day until the solstice, when the shadow pattern aligned perfectly with ceremonial gates. This wasn't just architecture, it was celestial choreography carved in clay bricks, where every shadow's edge carried sacred meaning. Archaeoastronomers studying satellite images made a startling discovery. The ziggurat of aligns with the winter solstice sunrise within 2 degrees of accuracy, while the ruins of Jur Kurigaltsu's temple frame the summer solstice sunset with equal precision. But the real genius lay in how priests used these shifting shadows as a civic calendar. When the shadow of the topmost shrine touched a specific altar at dawn, it signaled the Akitu festival, the Babylonian New Year celebrated with 12 days of processions and coronation rituals. Another shadow position marked the barley harvest, triggering tax collections across the empire. Modern laser scans reveal grooves cut into certain steps that amplified shadow contrasts during key dates, acting like ancient highlighting for celestial events. What's often overlooked is how these temples doubled as political tools. A newly crowned king would schedule his ascent to coincide with auspicious shadow patterns, literally stepping into power as the sun anointed him with light. The Epic of Gilgamesh even references this practice when the hero king builds Uruk's ziggurat. He boasts how its shadows will measure the heavens' favor. Recent excavations at Nippur uncovered clay tablets describing how priests used shadow lengths to predict Nile floods in distant Egypt, proving these structures were part of an international timekeeping network. The legacy of these shadow temples hides in plain sight. Iraq's modern marsh Arabs still plant date palms when the ruins of ancient ziggurats cast shadows at specific angles, a tradition passed down through oral history. Meanwhile, architects designing solar-powered buildings in Dubai study ziggurat shadow patterns for passive cooling inspiration. There's profound irony in realizing that 5,000 years before smart cities, these stepped pyramids were already harnessing the sun's rhythms to synchronize empires, not with microchips, but with the patient dance of light on baked earth. In the year 132, when most of the world still blamed earthquakes on angry gods, a Chinese polymath named Zhang Heng unveiled a device that would rewrite history, not just as the world's first seismoscope, but as a shockingly accurate timekeeping machine. Picture a towering bronze vessel adorned with 8 dragon heads, each clutching a metal ball above the open mouths of 8 corresponding toads. When tremors shook the earth, a hidden pendulum mechanism triggered one dragon to release its ball with a resounding clang, indicating the quake's direction. But here's what ancient texts failed to emphasize. Those falling balls didn't just point toward disaster, they measured its duration with pendulum precision. The genius of this dual-purpose design lay in its simplicity. Each bronze ball took exactly 2.5 seconds to descend from dragon to toad, a consistent interval Zhang Heng calibrated by testing drops with different weights and angles. Court scribes would count the number of balls released during an earthquake, multiply by the drop time, and calculate the tremor's duration to within 10% accuracy. Modern engineers testing replicas discovered something astonishing. The seismoscope's pendulum mechanism kept near-perfect time even when not triggered by quakes, functioning as a reliable clock between seismic events. The dragon's jaws were engineered to release balls at the slightest vibration yet resist false triggers from wind or footsteps, a sensitivity threshold modern seismographs wouldn't match until the 19th century. What makes this device truly revolutionary was its predictive capacity. Historical records describe how officials in Loyang noticed faster ball drops preceding major aftershocks, likely because the pendulum responded to subtle harmonic tremors undetectable to humans. Zhang's notes suggest he understood this phenomenon, writing about the dragon's impatient tongue as an early warning sign. Contemporary seismologists now recognize these precursor waves as key predictors, with some arguing the seismoscope essentially functioned as both clock and earthquake forecast system. The legacy of this 2,000-year-old invention echoes in unexpected places. Tokyo's early warning towers use a similar ball drop principle to signal quake intensity, while Swiss engineers recently adapted Zhang's pendulum concept for avalanche monitoring. Perhaps most remarkably, the 2.5-second rule for falling objects still appears in modern geology textbooks, proving that sometimes the oldest measurements are the hardest to improve upon. In an age where we've split the atom and probed Mars, there's humbling wisdom in a device that taught us to read time in the tremors beneath our feet. Deep in the oak groves of ancient Gaul, where Roman conquerors saw only untamed wilderness, Druidic priests were conducting a silent symphony of timekeeping, one where every rustling leaf and swelling bud marked the passage of seasons. The Celtic tree calendar divided the year into 13 lunar months, each governed by a different sacred tree whose growth phases became nature's clock face. Imagine a priest observing the first silver birch leaves unfurling in late January, not just as a sign of spring's approach, but as the official start of Beath month, when rituals for new beginnings and purification were performed. Unlike rigid solar calendars, this system breathed with the land itself. Willow month began when catkins turned golden, not on some arbitrary date scratched on parchment. Modern arborists have uncovered startling precision in these arboreal markers. The oak month Jur consistently aligns with summer solstice periods when acorns reach pea size, a stage modern forestry manuals confirm is the optimal time for bark harvesting to avoid harming the tree. Hawthorn's month Huath starts when blossoms peak, coinciding with soil temperatures reaching exactly 55 degrees Fahrenheit, the threshold when medieval farmers knew to move livestock to high pastures. What seemed like mystical nature worship was actually sophisticated phenology, the study of cyclical biological events encoded into spiritual practice. The calendar's legacy thrives in surprising ways. Contemporary cider makers in Brittany still time their apple harvests by the vine month Muin rather than Gregorian dates, finding bricks' sugar levels are consistently higher when berries reach the shriveling stage described in Druidic texts. Neo-pagan traditions have preserved the tree month's symbolic meanings: birch for rebirth, rowan for protection, elder for endings, though modern practitioners often miss their original practicality. A 2,000-year-old oak stump discovered in Anglesey bore carvings matching the tree calendar's sequence, suggesting it served as a living instructional device for apprentice druids. Scientific validation came in 2018 when botanists compared centuries of herbarium specimens with the Celtic calendar's predictions. Budburst dates for 13 indicator species matched historical tree month transitions 89% of the time, an accuracy rate surpassing medieval European calendars. Climate researchers now study these arboreal markers to track long-term environmental shifts, since trees respond to subtle temperature and moisture changes invisible to mechanical instruments. There's profound wisdom in a timekeeping system that needs no gears or numbers, just patient observation of the living world's eternal rhythms. Perhaps the most poignant survival of this knowledge is found in Ireland's hedgerows, where farmers still say, "When the blackthorn flowers, sow no grain," an agricultural proverb directly descended from the tree calendar's ash month warnings. In our age of atomic clocks and digital reminders, these ancient arboreal markers remind us that time isn't just something we measure, but something we grow through season by season, ring by ring. Across the endless dunes of the Arabian Peninsula, where shifting sands erase all landmarks by dawn, Bedouin navigators carried timekeeping secrets stitched into their very belongings. These weren't elaborate instruments, but humble strips of camel leather etched with precise star paths, ancient GPS for the desert night. Picture a caravan master unfurling his worn star dial by firelight, tracing the etched line connecting Al-Jadi to Al-Nair with his calloused finger. That angular path didn't just point north, it revealed how many hours remained until dawn based on the stars' nightly dance. The brilliance of these portable star dials lay in their adaptive simplicity. Each strip was customized for its owner's common trade routes, with different constellations emphasized depending on whether they traveled the frankincense trail or the salt roads. During summer months, when Scorpio dominated the sky, dials featured wider spacing between markings to account for the constellation's slower arc. Winter versions compressed more star transitions into the same leather length, matching Orion's quicker journey across the cold night. Modern astronomers analyzing surviving dials found their angular measurements accurate to within 3 degrees, enough to estimate time within 20-minute increments across a 6-hour night. What made these devices revolutionary was their resistance to the desert's greatest navigational hazard, dunes that rearranged overnight. Unlike fixed landmarks, the stars remained constant, and the Bedouins' intimate knowledge of their movements turned the entire sky into a reliable clock face. Certain dials even accounted for atmospheric refraction near the horizon, with subtle curvature in their etched lines compensating for how Earth's atmosphere bends starlight. Researchers at the UAE's Desert Navigation Institute recently proved their effectiveness by having volunteers attempt night crossings using only replica dials. The results stunned them. Groups employing star paths maintained direction and timing accuracy comparable to those with modern compasses and watches. These leather timekeepers did more than just tell hours, they encoded survival wisdom. Specific star alignments warned of approaching sandstorms, as the Bedouin noticed celestial patterns shifted before major wind events. Other markings indicated when to seek lower ground as temperature drops made higher dunes treacherous. The dial's true genius was their dual purpose as teaching tools. Fathers would point to etchings while telling children stories about each constellation, weaving navigation lessons into oral tradition. Today, their legacy lives where you'd least expect. British Special Forces train with star dial replicas for behind-enemy line navigation, while NASA includes similar star tracking techniques in astronaut survival training. Perhaps most poetically, Dubai's modern camel racing tracks use laser-projected star dial patterns during night events, an homage to the ancient methods that once guided caravans through darkness. In our satellite-dependent age, there's humbling wisdom in remembering that sometimes the most reliable technology fits in your palm and smells faintly of leather and campfire smoke. In the misty pre-dawn hours of 15th century Seoul, a mechanical marvel awoke with a sound no Korean had ever heard before: the automated voice of time itself. The Jajongnu, or striking water clock, didn't just measure hours, it announced them with gongs and drums that echoed through the palace courtyards, all powered by nothing but gravity and hydraulic ingenuity. Picture a towering wooden structure over 12 feet tall, its inner chambers filled with water that lifted floating arrows as precisely as a modern elevator. When the arrow reached certain markings, it triggered bamboo mallets to strike bronze bells for the hour and wooden clappers for the half-hour intervals. But here's what made it revolutionary. This was no fragile prototype. King Sejong's engineers mass-produced these clocks across the kingdom, standardizing timekeeping for an entire nation centuries before Europe would achieve similar precision. The genius of the Jajongnu lay in its self-regulating design. Monsoon season presented a nightmare for traditional water clocks. Fluctuating humidity warped wooden components, while torrential rains altered water viscosity. Korean engineers countered this with adjustable gear trains that could be recalibrated seasonally. Summer settings slowed the water flow to account for increased evaporation, while winter configurations prevented freezing by adding alcohol to the reservoir, an innovation horologists wouldn't replicate until 18th century marine chronometers. Modern replicas built by the National Science Museum of Korea revealed even more sophistication. The original clocks likely used multiple interconnected tanks to maintain constant water pressure, a principle identical to modern flush toilet cistern systems. What's often overlooked is how these clocks democratized time. Prior to the Jajongnu, only royalty and astronomers had access to accurate timekeeping. King Sejong, the same visionary who created Korea's Hangul alphabet, ordered simplified versions installed in public squares, complete with visual aids like colored flags that rose with the hours. Farmers could now time crop rotations by the clock strikes rather than unreliable sundials, while merchants synchronized market openings across provinces. Historical records describe how clockkeepers would adjust the mechanisms daily based on celestial observations, creating a feedback loop between ancient star lore and cutting-edge engineering. The Jajongnu's legacy resonates in unexpected places. Early Japanese water clocks borrowed its dual striking mechanism, while its constant flow design inspired 19th century fire station alarm systems. Perhaps most impressively, when Swiss watchmakers attempted to recreate the clock in 2014 using period-accurate materials, they couldn't match its 15 minutes per week accuracy without adding modern lubricants. There's poetic justice in realizing that a device built to conquer Korea's rainy seasons became the first truly all-weather public clock, a masterpiece of hydro-mechanical harmony that still whispers its secrets to anyone patient enough to listen. High on the arid mesas of Arizona, where the sun bakes the earth into cracked clay, the Hopi people cultivated timekeeping into an art of survival. For centuries, designated Sun-Watches village elders chosen for their keen eyesight and unwavering patience perched atop sandstone cliffs at dawn, their gaze locked on the horizon where sunlight first kissed the desert. But these weren't casual observations, they were precision measurements etched into the land itself. The Hopi calibrated their entire agricultural calendar by tracking how the sunrise shifted between specific rock formations, turning the jagged outline of Black Mesa into a colossal celestial dial. When the sun's golden edge aligned with a particular notch in the rocks, it signaled the time to plant drought-resistant corn in dry sand, a method modern agronomists now call arid zone chronagriculture. What made this system revolutionary was its granular adaptation to microclimates. While most ancient cultures tracked solstices broadly, the Hopi recognized subtle variations between villages just miles apart. A sunrise that signaled planting time for Orebai's fields might arrive 3 days later for Walpi's higher elevation, a discrepancy the Sun Watchers accounted for by memorizing dozens of local horizon markers. Modern drone surveys reveal these sightlines weren't arbitrary. They corresponded to geological features that amplified solstice light, like reflective quartz veins or shadow-casting hoodoos. During summer solstice, sunlight would funnel through a narrow rock window near First Mesa, creating a laser-straight beam that illuminated a specific petroglyph for exactly 7 minutes, nature's alarm clock for beginning the bean dance ceremony. The practical benefits of this system are staggering. University of Arizona researchers studying Hopi cornfields found crops planted by these solar markers required 30% less irrigation than those following conventional calendars. The secret lay in perfect timing. The Sun Watchers' predictions ensured seeds germinated just before rare monsoon rains, while harvests coincided with autumn's dew cycles. Even the corn's genetics adapted to this rhythm, developing deeper roots and waxier leaves over generations. Contemporary dry and farmers replicating these methods report similar water savings, proving it's not just folklore but applied ecological wisdom. Beyond agriculture, the sun markers governed Hopi spirituality and social structure. Certain rock alignments served as celestial offices. Only when sunlight touched a specific boulder could elders convene to settle disputes or plan migrations. The winter solstice observation point at Old Orebi doubles as a solar observatory and legal landmark. Property boundaries were traditionally measured from where the solstice shadow fell at midday. Archaeoastronomers recently discovered that some mesa footpaths align with solar events. Walking the trail to Spider Rock at equinox sunrise casts a traveler's shadow directly toward ancestral burial sites, blending navigation with remembrance. The legacy of the Sun-Watches endures in surprising ways. NASA Desert Research and Technology Studies team consulted Hopi elders when designing Mars daylight sensors, recognizing their expertise in extracting precise time data from harsh landscapes. Meanwhile, modern Hopi artists incorporate solar markers into silverwork and weaving, encoding celestial patterns into wearable almanacs. There's profound humility in realizing that while we've split the atom and probed distant galaxies, some of the most accurate timekeeping still begins with an elder's quiet vigil at dawn, watching light creep across ancient stones, a reminder that sometimes the best technology isn't built, but inherited through generations of patient observation. From the towering obelisks of Egypt to the celestial songlines of Aboriginal Australia, ancient timekeeping methods might seem wildly different at first glance, but peel back the cultural layers, and you'll uncover three universal principles that transformed random observations into precise systems. First and foremost, these civilizations mastered the art of reading nature's unshakable rhythms. Whether tracking the Nile's annual floods by the heliacal rising of Sirius, or noting how the Mayan maize sprouted when Venus appeared as the morning star, they recognized that the universe operates in cycles far more reliable than human-made devices. Modern chronobiologists confirm this intuition. Our planet's rotation, lunar phases, and seasonal shifts create patterns so consistent that the Hopi Sun-Watches could predict planting dates within a 3-day window using only rock formations and sunlight. The second principle, standardization, turned personal observation into communal infrastructure. The Babylonians didn't just note eclipses, they codified them into Saro's cycle tables scribed across hundreds of clay tablets, creating a shared database for astronomers across generations. Similarly, Rome's nocturnal water shifts weren't arbitrary. They followed legally enforced schedules etched into bronze valves, ensuring every household from patrician villas to plebeian tenements received their fair allotment. This shift from individual perception to collective systems was revolutionary. Imagine a Viking ship captain consulting not just his own sun compass, but a fleet-wide navigation manual where every star path's timing had been verified by countless voyages. But perhaps most ingenious was their resourcefulness, the ability to innovate with whatever materials lay at hand. The Inca stored celestial data in knotted khipu cords because they lacked written script, while Tibetan monks used scripture pages as meditation timers in a land where metal was scarce for clockmaking. Even something as ephemeral as smoke became a precision tool in the hands of Song dynasty incense masters, who calibrated burn rates by blending sawdust and resins like alchemists crafting temporal gold. Today's engineers are rediscovering this principle through biomimicry, like designing solar panels that track light like sunflowers or water systems modeled on Kanat tunnels. What's striking is how these ancient principles now guide cutting-edge sustainable design. Just as the Maya built El Castillo to harvest shadows for timekeeping, modern architects construct living buildings that use sunlight and airflow as natural climate controls. The Polynesian star compass's emphasis on pattern recognition over rigid coordinates inspires AI navigation systems for self-driving cars. Even our struggle to reduce electronic waste mirrors the Incas' philosophy. Their quipus required no rare metals, just renewable fibers that returned to the earth. These aren't historical curiosities, but blueprints for a future where we relearn to tell time by the world's heartbeat, rather than forcing it into digital boxes. The deeper lesson: accuracy doesn't demand complexity sometimes. It's hidden in the patient observation of a dripping bowl, the scent of smoldering sandalwood, or the way shadows climb a canyon wall at dawn. These 27 ancient timekeeping methods shatter the myth that accuracy was born with digital clocks and atomic precision. From Viking sailors navigating by the taste of ocean currents to Tibetan monks measuring meditation with page turns, our ancestors transformed shadows, stars, and even scents into tools rivaling modern technology. Their true brilliance lay not just in ingenuity, but in harmony. The way Mayan priests synchronized harvests with Venus cycles, or Persian Kanat's balanced water shares across entire regions without a single gear. These weren't crude estimates, they were systems refined over generations, where a single degree of alignment could mean the difference between feast and famine. The most surprising revelation: these techniques aren't relics. NASA consults Polynesian star paths for backup navigation, while Swiss engineers study Zhang Heng's seismoscope for disaster prediction. Farmers from the Andes to Rajasthan still plant by celestial markers passed down through oral tradition, often outperforming satellite forecasts. Even our language preserves these ancient rhythms. Phrases like "a clock" harken back to medieval water bells, while the 7-day week traces directly to Egyptian Deccan stars. These connections prove that timekeeping was never just about measurement. It was about meaning, weaving human lives into the fabric of the cosmos. Consider this: the next time your phone adjusts for daylight savings automatically, it's executing logic the Babylonians encoded in clay tablets. When astronauts track their position using star charts, they're applying principles perfected by Bedouin leather dials. This continuity challenges our obsession with progress. Perhaps we haven't so much improved on the past as rediscovered it with new tools. The Maya's Venus tables or the Inca's knotted calendars achieved accuracy that still baffles historians, not through superior technology, but through patient observation spanning centuries. So as you scroll through digital hours today, pause at the miracle that someone first thought to count them, using nothing but a stick's shadow or a dripping bowl. Share which ancient timekeeper left you awestruck. Was it the Aztec stone predicting eclipses, or the incense clocks turning minutes into poetry? Their legacy whispers that time isn't just something we chase, but a dance we join, one our ancestors mastered with nothing but curiosity and the turning sky. Subscribe to keep unraveling history's hidden genius, because sometimes the most advanced solutions aren't ahead of us, but behind, waiting to be remembered.